Black economic empowerment has been criticised for elevating business costs and trying to artificially right the wrongs of the apartheid past. Other legislation, like the recently passed Employment Equity Amendment Act, have also been slammed for doing the same. In her book, BEE, Helping or Hurting, Anthea Jeffrey dissects a slew of proposed legislation put on the table in recent years and asks tough questions about their efficacy. She joins me now in studio to give us some perspectives from her book. Thank you very much for joining us, Anthea.
Thank you.
Helping or Hurting suggests that the book looks at both sides. On the one hand, the fact that there's this attempt to redress the imbalances of the past, but obviously on the other hand, some of the unintended consequences that result as a result.
Right. Indeed, the book is very comprehensive because it looks at BEE and all its manifestations, from employment equity through to the criteria that are used in university admissions, to BEE in the generic codes, in the mining sector and the oil sector, and finally to all the rules about land reform. And the aim is really to see whether all these rules are having the positive impact that many people would hope for in terms of providing redress for past wrongs and helping to open up opportunities, or whether they are, in fact, as many people fear, empowering again and again the usual suspects, as they're sometimes called, a relatively small group, often with close ties to the ruling party, and leaving the great majority of poor people right outside the scope of all these rules. And my belief, having done all the research for the book, is that the latter concern is really valid, and that there are some 19 million poor South Africans, many of them badly skilled because of Bantu education and the fact that schooling has unfortunately remained bad since 1994, many of them without jobs. And for people in this situation, there simply is no prospect of gaining access to a BEE ownership deal or a management job or a preferential contract from the state, or even on-the-job training, because many of them don't have the jobs to begin with. And then one fears that all the effort and the resources that are being plowed into BEE in all these different aspects is not really getting through to the bottom, that it is helping the relative elite and bringing a very considerable cost to the economy.
Anthea, I think it's well understood and appreciated that indeed, the usual suspects benefited from the BEE that was set up in the past. But government tells us now that with these new amendments, it's supposed to be broad-based Black economic empowerment. And it doesn't just look at issues like ownership, because not everyone can be an owner. It looks at things like skills development, training, and so on and so forth. But don't those elements actually help in assisting to bring the up-and-coming generation forward, given that it can't just be the education system alone from a basic level that has to work to better things, surely?
Well, the first thing is that we must have the basic education in place. And I think there's a lot of concern that 80% or so of our schools are dysfunctional, that many people are leaving with matric, supposedly, with a pass rate of 35% or so, but still not really with the skills that business is looking for, or with the skills that would open up to them tertiary opportunities. And I know the government is constantly saying they're making BEE more broad-based, but in fact there's still a huge emphasis on ownership, and all companies, including quite small companies, will now have to do ownership deals, even though the costs are high, estimated 600 billion, possibly as high as 2 trillion before all the BEE deals have been done. And in terms of things like enterprise development, which the government also now is putting a lot of emphasis on, and saying that firms will have to generate SMEs that are 51% Black owned as part of their supply chains, or as people out there in the marketplace who they help to prosper. But that's really it's a very great stretch for many businesses which are themselves quite small, which are finding it quite difficult to keep their own businesses afloat in this very difficult economic and other environment, and who now also have to put a great deal of energy and money into trying to incubate small businesses, where, again, one worries that there isn't really a quick fix available. For example, research by the Finmark Trust a little while ago into the ingredients for success in small business identified excellent education, tertiary education, number of years of experience working in business, and on that foundation you can go out and make your own But if you haven't had the opportunity for all those inputs, then it's very difficult to succeed. And to give the job to businesses already struggling with their own issues that they must now also generate other businesses, well, it's difficult. And it adds to the complexity of doing business in South Africa. And our concern is it's beginning to choke off growth and investment and the job creation that we so urgently need.
Anthea, I appreciate your concerns. You know, one of the issues that you seem to raise is that it's much better for government to concentrate on economic growth rather than on racial quotas. That's understood, but we have seen historically that when there is economic growth, not everyone benefits from it. You know, if you've got a wave coming in and basically you're in a better position than the next person, you find that that person goes out further and prospers further, whilst the person who's at the shore actually just stays there. So does economic growth necessarily mean that a poorer person is going to get a better chance in life?
Well, I think economic growth is an essential foundation. If your choice is between growth and redistribution, it's important to choose the growing of the cake as well as dividing it up in a different way. Dividing it up is never going to do the job. But what you need to do, we argue in the book, is to shift from BEE to EED, which, if I can explain, is economic empowerment for the disadvantaged. In other words, it would not have the current racial focus. Race is increasingly not a particularly good indicator of disadvantage anymore after 20 years of these policies. And also, instead of focusing on quotas and targets, on outputs, it would focus on inputs. What do we need to make it easier for those who are poor and disadvantaged to climb the economic ladder? And it starts, of course, with excellent education. And we have ideas on how we can improve schooling very quickly, in essence, by taking much of the job of providing schooling out of the hands of the state. So the government would continue to fund education using tax revenues, but parents would be given vouchers equal to the amount that the government currently spends per pupil, which is about 12,000 a year. And that would give all parents the kind of choice about what school they want to send their child to, which at the moment is mostly reserved for the middle class and the upper middle class. We want to see that choice much more widely available, also because when schools have to compete for pupils, they will up their game. The competition will mean increased standards all around. And we have similar ideas that could be applied right across the spectrum, innovative ways of looking at our challenges and seeing how we can overcome them, which will help to make economic empowerment for the disadvantaged a reality.
Thanks very much, Anthea. Clearly your book identifies the problems and gives possible solutions. So thank you very much for that. That was Anthea Jeffrey. She's author of BE, Helping or Hurting.